All right, so it should be recording now. Sorry, we're beginning a few minutes late. I got to campus today and found out that the internet stopped working. I thought it was just my office. I guess I was being paranoid, but it's actually my office and a few of the surrounding offices. The network was down, which included the server for the class. So if I'd driven directly down to the coast, we probably wouldn't be able to do anything because, and I was planning to go to the coast because the server was down. So trying to demonstrate anything wouldn't have really worked. Lamar was the one that pointed it out that it didn't work. Of course, I'd figured it out about 20 seconds earlier that it didn't work too. But now it's back up, and I haven't even checked to see if it has the same IP address, but I think it must because NV license was also, the NV license manager was also using the same machine. Anyway, if you tried to get on the department server over the weekend, I don't know exactly when it had stopped working, but it might have just been that it was down. So if you tried to do it and it didn't work like Lamar did, it should be up now. That makes sense? I don't know if you've tested it. In fact, maybe we should test it. So I'll bring up our catalog and see if I can. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the coast on Thursday instead. You can get in? Okay, great. So I don't need to test it. All right. So I was working with those guys all day, and I didn't have time to actually test out what we're gonna show today. So there may be a few more bumps than normal, like when I get off track and I try to demonstrate something that I didn't practice. Sometimes there's a few bumps. Well, the whole thing today, I haven't tested anything that I'm going to do today. But what we're going to talk about today doesn't involve the front end at all yet. Okay, so we've been doing front end stuff, JavaScript stuff for a few weeks now, and we're going to shift gears and we're going to do a little bit of back end stuff. We're going to set up a program to run on the server that instead of being a map server is going to be a geoprocessing server. And we're going to do 2 weeks of this. So today what we're going to talk about is all ArcGIS based. In other words, if you want to set up a something that does GIS operations on the server, this is how you do it in the ArcGIS world. That's what we're going to talk about today. Okay, if you want to do it in the open source world, that's what we'll talk about next week. So we're going to do a geoprocess. ArcGIS calls this a geoprocessing service. And so there's a few things that we need to know to set up our own geoprocessing service. But for right now, you need to know that what we're trying to do is a GIS operations on the server where some of the inputs and some of the results can be viewed on the client. So we can basically create a JavaScript program that will access this program. In other words, what we'll be talking about on Friday is how to connect to this geoprocessing service that we create. Okay. And we may bleed into Monday on this. Who knows? But we've got basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lectures in which to talk about this subject of GIS operations on the server. So, all right, so that's what we're going to do. This is the 10.1 help page. I think all the machines are at least on 10.2. So this might be a little bit old. This computer's on 10.1. Yes, I know some of the computers are still on 10.1. So it's good to have the 10.1 help. I just Googled this. I'll put the link up later. But we'll we'll walk through creating one of these services. You can all walk through that process with me if you want, or if you want to just refer to this and the lecture, you should be able to walk through it on your own sometime. First question I want to ask is, how many of you are familiar with Model Builder? Model Builder, raise your hand. A little bit, some, not at all. How about you on the coast? Have you used Model Builder before? No. No? Okay. So lots of times we teach Model Builder in some of the courses, some of the lower level GIS courses that we teach. So it doesn't sound like much of you have any background on Model Builder. So we're going to have to talk about what Model Builder does a little bit today. Okay. Now, when you build your own GIS processing service, basically you're gluing together GIS commands on the server. That's what you're doing. And Model Builder isn't the only way to do these GIS processing commands. It's not the only way to do that. You could also do it through a programming language called Python, which is actually the way I prefer to do it. I think Model Builder's got kind of a clunky interface personally. It's just my own personal opinion. But Model Builder is seen as being easier for people with less programming background to kind of tackle. But the concept remains the same. So if I had prepared well, I should have had a, let's see if I can find one just by Googling. Okay, if I prepared well, I would have shown something like, I don't know, let's see if one of these works out. Well, here's an example of Model Builder process. I just Googled this, but what Model Builder allows you to do is to actually implement a process model, a model that will start with certain inputs, which are the blue circles in this case, and then engage in certain GIS processes, which are the yellow squares in this case, and then those processes will produce additional outputs, which are the green circles. And the green circles can be the outputs, or the green circle may be a intermediate step, and there may be a final result later. Okay, we're going to keep our GIS processes fairly simple for today's example, but you could get really complex. I mean, you could build a big model. Okay, let me give you some examples of models that I've created before for different projects that I've done. Okay, one, I have a website. In fact, we can go there. Maybe I've shown this before. migratorybirds.org. So this website, it has the ability to say, I want to know about migratory bird habitat in my area. So let's say the only areas are right around the edge of the lakes there. Okay, let's say I live near Chicago. I live just north of Chicago, in a little area called Highland Park. Okay, I want to know about the migratory bird habitat there. Well, I can summarize the stopover habitat there in this web app by saying I want to look at a user-defined site. I want to choose a user-defined site right here, downtown Highland Park. I'm going to choose that area. That's a polygon, okay? You can think of this as a GeoJSON polygon at this point. Double click on it. I've got my my GeoJSON polygon that I created. And now I can submit that. It took a little while for it to show up. Actually, one of the things that happened there was that GeoJSON object was sent to the server, symbolized on the server. That's not really necessary, but think of that polygon as a GeoJSON polygon. Now, if I hit submit, let's name this something. Island Park layer. Highland Park birds. Now, if I hit submit, what's going on is that that polygon there got sent to the server. And the geoprocessing service is being run, and it's a simple geoprocessing service. It's just running a clip, a raster clip. It's clipping out the raster data in that polygon, and then it's doing basically the equivalent of a, what's it called? Table statistics in raster. I think that's what it's called, something like that. It's creating a table that shows each land cover and the number of pixels for each land cover, okay? And then it's returning that table, that output table, to the front end, okay? To this web map. It's saying, okay, here's that table, just a bunch of key value pairs. Land cover developed has 30 pixels. Land cover urban has 10 pixels. I know that I'm going way under. It's actually taking a little while to run this, if it ever completes. Probably not the best designed web app, and that is something that you need to consider. Is that in this case, the processing time is ridiculously long. You shouldn't really have a web app that takes this long to process, but in this case, this is what the consumer wanted. So it runs, and eventually it's going to produce a table. Okay, so that's the kind of thing that you want to do. All right, so implementing this in ArcGIS is as simple as building a model builder model, running the model builder model, and then telling the model what you want to be configurable by the. In other words, what inputs do you want the user to be able to define, and what results do you want the user to be able to see? Okay. All right, so we're gonna practice that. Let's see if this ever finished. No, it hasn't finished. I wonder if this this whole thing is having an issue with the latest version of Internet Explorer. Internet Explorer is a common foe. Okay, so I got this little area right here. I'm going to try it in Chrome. See if the same thing happens. But while that's working, what I'm going to do is I want to keep the example fairly simple. So what I want to do is create a situation where we're doing maybe one or at the most two GIS operations. What's an example of something we could do? Well, we could cut out something from a raster, like my example, or we could just clip a bunch of features. We could just select a bunch of features. Any preference from you all, or no?
Using your rest layer, make a polygon layer, calculate the average.
The average.
Whatever the values are in the raster. Okay,
yeah, so like the average elevation for an area, something like that, or the average temperature. Okay, that sounds good. Now, when you set, this is a good route to perhaps follow here. When you set one of these up, you need to think about what sort of data you're going to have on the server and what sort of data you're going to expect them to provide. So in this case, I would recommend that the raster to be summarized already be on the server. And it doesn't make any sense. If the raster is on the client, it doesn't make any sense to push a very large raster every time somebody draws a polygon, to push a very large raster up to the server, then clip it on the server, and then send that back down to the results back down to the client. It doesn't make any sense. So what's far more likely in a web application is that you have access to a raster and you want them to be able to get summary values. And what they provide is the region of interest, the polygon or the point. Like, let's just say you click on a point and you want to find out what's there. Of course, that's the same thing as identify, so we don't really want to do that. It's more like we want to supply them with a polygon. Okay, I'm going to simplify the example a little bit for today. They're going to provide a point, and we'll do a buffer to symbolize it there. Okay, the reason why is because that'll be easier to run. That'll be easier to run as an example without a web front end. And since we haven't developed, we're not going to develop the web front end until Thursday. We'll do it like that. Okay, so the user clicks somewhere and they're going to get an average elevation or an average value for the raster within a certain distance. And maybe they could also specify that distance. Okay. All right. Let's see. This finally ran. So yeah, it's just an IE bug that's happening. So see, the results came back and they had the number of cells in each of the categories here. And then on the front end, I just turned that into a chart. Not something that you can necessarily do right now with the knowledge that you have, but you could at least report the values. Maybe not build a chart of the values, but you could report the values. All right, so that's that. Okay. Let's look for a data set that we probably already have. Didn't we already do elevation for? Let's open up. I'm going to open up ArcMap because we need to build. ArcMap still serves as the document with which to publish our services. In this case, the geoprocessing services. So I'm going to open up ArcMap, and I'm going to find that elevation data set that we utilized. You know, now it's been 3 or 4 weeks ago that we built our first map services, maybe even more than that. So I'll hit add data. I don't know where I put them, probably in C courses, web mapping, data, Forest 100. Okay, so this is Forest County's elevation data. See that? Let me see what the let's see what this coordinate system is in. Okay, it's in transverse Mercator projection. So it's probably MSTM, the Mississippi Transverse Mercator projection. Now, rasters are a lot more finicky in terms of the coordinate system that they're in, and the overlay working correctly. Okay. So I'm debating as to whether or not I should. Maybe I've already done it though. I thought we changed these values. No, I thought we changed these to Web Mercator, but maybe we didn't. I think I'm going to change this into Web Mercator just to make sure that it'll work correctly with the points that come across. Okay, so I'm going to say, okay, let's go to data management tools. We'll go to projections and transformations, and we're going to do raster and project raster. I'm going to choose the raster that I want to project, and I'm going to project this raster and call it. I'm going to call it Forest Web Mercator, WM. Oops, I chose reference raster. I want to choose output raster. Oh, I hit register raster, not project raster somehow. Project raster, there we go. Sorry about that. Okay, Forest 100. And I'm going to say, I'm going to put this in C, courses, web mapping, data. Now I'm going to call this Forest, WM for Forest Web Mercator. And I'm going to set the output coordinate system. That's under projected. Then under world. Then under Web Mercator auxiliary sphere, right here. And that's fine to just choose the default geographic transformation. Okay. So now I'm going to hit O. I'm going to call it forest_.img. And this is all being done on your local machine at this point. Okay. So I hit OK. It's going to process through. It's going to create a new data set that is going to be in Web Mercator. As soon as it finishes, there it goes. All right. And the next thing I'm going to do is remove the one that's not in Web Mercator. And I'm going to go back up to layers and make sure that my data frame is in the right coordinate system. So I'm going to say import, and I'm going to choose the Web Mercator data set I just created. So now that data set that I just created is in Web Mercator, and the data frame that I'm looking at is in Web Mercator. So they're both in Web Mercator, both in the same coordinate system. All right. So the next thing that I need to do is to build a model based on that'll form the basis of my geoprocessing service. So my model needs to calculate the summary for a particular area that's given. We said the mean, maybe it can do more. Do you actually want it to output just the number that summarizes the, so like, you know, like if they choose this area right here, and it's going to plop out a number. That makes sense. Choose an area here, it's going to plop out a number. That sounds great. Okay, so let's do that. Okay, so if you haven't created a tool or a model before, you do that by creating your own toolbox. So you can go up into Arc Toolbox and right-click on Arc Toolbox and say Add Toolbox. Now, what it's going to do is say, oh, you want to add a toolbox, and it's going to look on your computer for a toolbox. Well, we're going to create our own toolbox. So we need a new toolbox, and I'm going to put it in the same location, actually. And I'm going to choose new. I'm going to create a new toolbox, and then I'm going to choose that new toolbox that I just created. Okay. So I'm going to click on New Toolbox. Okay, so I got toolbox.tvx, and I can rename that. I'm just going to call it Web Tools for now. So these are tools that are going to get published. So I'm going to rename it Web Tools. Click off of it. Click on it. and say open. So now it's going to create, or it's going to add that empty toolbox to my list of tools. I'm going to close up the other ones. You can see this. See the web tools that I created down there? That's a new toolbox. Right here. Brand new toolbox. It's empty. So we're going to fill it up. We're going to put a tool in the toolbox, and then we're going to author our tool. So we can right click on web tools and say new model. So we want to do new model. We want to create a new model data set. So I hit new model, and at this point I get a white screen, and who knows, well, I don't have to say that because we already said very few of you are familiar with Model Builder, but who's actually used tools in the toolbox before? Most everybody, okay? So if you use a tool in toolbox, you understand that concept. You can take the tools in toolbox and you can drag them onto models. So you can chain them together. You could say, okay, here's a tool, here's another tool, and you can chain them together to create a tool. Now, even if your tool that you're going to publish only has one tool in it, you still need to make a model for it. Okay, I guess that's one weakness. All right, so I'm going to drag my tool on here, the tools that I know I need. I need one called, I'm gonna probably need buffer. Okay, that's under proximity. There's buffer right there. Gonna need buffer, and I'm also going to need zonal statistics as table. That's under spatial analyst tools. Zonal statistics is under here. Zonal statistics as table. Oh, I got to turn on. I got to make sure I turn on my. If you don't have it on, you need to turn it on. If you go under customize extensions, you can turn on your zonal statistics as table. Sorry, spatial analyst. Turn on spatial analyst extension, and then you can do that. All right. Has anybody used the zonal statistics as table tool before? Okay. All the zonal statistics as table tool does is it takes two inputs. In fact, I'll click on it right here, and you can see the inputs that it takes. It takes two main inputs here. One is the zone data. The zones are the areas for which you want summaries. Okay. In other words, they'd be the polygons that that you'd be inputting. Okay, those would be the polygons. The zone field is the unique identifier that separates the zones, because you know, in the Mars scenario here, he's picturing a single polygon, but there's no tool that does that. So the tool that is closest to it is this one, and it allows you to put multiple polygons if you want to, and each of those polygons can have a separate unique identifier. And so the zone 1 could have its mean, zone 2 could have its mean, zone 3 could have its mean, and so on. If we only have one zone, it's going to produce a single mean, which is what we want. But theoretically, this tool would actually allow us to put as many polygons as we wanted to. All right. By the way, on the, where'd my mouse go? Tabulate area. If I hit tabulate area here and I go to tool help, this is the tool that basically is running in the background for that migratory birds example. So I used to allow people to put multiple polygons in, but for right now I only have a single value, and so this just reports the count of each So these would be land covers across this way, and this is the number in each land cover. And so all I did was graph those numbers as you go across there. All right, so that's tabulate area. It's a similar tool to what we're running here, which is zonal statistics as table. All zonal statistics as table does is instead of giving you the counts for each zone, it gives you a summary of each zone. The mean, the min, the max, the standard deviation. It gives you all that stuff. All right. So we've got our input raster or feature zone data to choose. That's the first input. That's going to be the user-defined input. Okay. So we actually need to create a data set that's going to represent that. So ArcGIS forces you to create an example for what's going to be the input. So for right now, we don't have anything to put there, right? The zone field is just the unique identifier. We're probably just going to choose the FID or the unique ID for that data set. Okay, what about the value raster? The value raster is the data set that's going to be summarized. In this case, it's the elevation data set. And then the output table is actually going to be what we give back to the user. The user on the back end can actually take the output table and do something with it. That's our end goal, is that the user gets the output table and then could report that somewhere on the front end. So perhaps the user clicks on the elevation data, and that click fires an event that runs this geoprocessing service, returns the result, and we say the average elevation within that area is X. The average temperature, whatever data set we're using. In this case, we're going to use the elevation data set because that's what we have at our fingertips. All right. So once we made that clear, let's go back and let's create a data set that we will use to kind of fire this off, to run this. All right. So in order to do that, we need a new data set. Maybe you've done that before, but if you haven't, it's really easy. I'm going to go to the location where I want to create my new data set. In this case, I want to do it in C data, no, not data, courses, web mapping, data, and I'm going to create it right there. I'm going to say new shapefile. I'm going to create a new shapefile. That new shapefile is going to be called, I'm just going to call it user point. It's going to be my fake user point. And I'm going to actually make it a point. I'm going to set the coordinate system to be in the same coordinate system, the Web Mercator auxiliary sphere. So I set my coordinate system to be the same as all the other data is, and it just makes it easier. Okay. And then I say OK here. And it creates a new user point shapefile right there. If I want to, in fact, I probably should go in here and look at the fields that are in there. There's a field called FID, and also by default, there's a field called ID. Okay? I can use either one of these as the summary. Since there's only going to be one input, it doesn't really matter which field I choose to be the result. I mean, to be the zonal feature. All right. Oh, I'm going to drag this. I already did. So I've got user point. I've dragged it onto here. See, it's right there. When I turn it off and on, nothing happens because there's no data in it. Okay. I've got to add the data. So I go to the editor, customize. Where's the editor? Windows. Toolbars, there it is. Toolbars, editor. Okay, and I say editor, start editing. At this point, I can add user points onto the map. Now, I'm just going to add a single user point because we're just going to have single user clicks at a time. So I'm going to add it somewhere interesting, maybe right here in the middle of the Forest County in one of these gullies. Oh, I got to, did it add it? No, I didn't add it. So I have to click this first and then click onto the map. So now I've added it. Oops, I added another one over here. Got to delete that one. I'm going to hit delete. So I've got my one right there. It's there. And I can say editor, stop editing. It'll ask me if I want to save my edits, and I'll say yes. I'm going to make the symbol a little bit better. I'm going to make it a regular circle, make it red, just for fun so that you can see it more easily on the screen. See that red dot? I've got a single red dot. If I open up the attribute table, I can see that, that's not the attribute table. If I open up the attribute table, I've got a single red dot, and the ID is 0 and the FID are 0. I could use either one of those fields. Probably use the ID field. Okay. So we're ready now to create the model. So we can go back into our toolbox, find the model. By the way, since I'm at it, while I'm at it, I can go down into the model here, right click and hit rename. And I can call this summarize, let's call this, it's summarize elevation. Summarize elevation. So that's what I'm going to call this. I'm going to hit save. I'm going to close it and then reopen it. Oh, it didn't take. All right, so it looks like I have to close it, then rename it, then hit edit. Now it took. I wanted to rename it just so that it didn't just say model when I published it. All right, so I've got my model. I've got my two tools that I'm going to run. Now I can build my model. So the first thing that I want to do is buffer that point because I want to summarize everything within a certain buffer. Okay. This could be a population density data set, and I could be finding out the population within that circle. Okay, there could be lots of other applications. It doesn't just have to be an elevation data set. So I hit buffer and double click it, and then I choose user point as the input. Okay, for the output feature class, I'm going to do something that you probably haven't heard of before, but it'll be a good thing to learn. Okay, I'm going to type /in_memory/ and I'm going to call this zone area, that's what I want to call it. And then for the linear unit, I'm going to make the linear unit for right now be 100. So with everything within 100 meters. And say, okay. Once I do that, you'll see that the tool turns colored. Okay. We know, I already explained what the colors mean. The blues are the primary inputs, the beginning inputs. The greens are either final or intermediate data sets. And the yellows are the processes themselves. Okay. Why do you think it turned green? I mean, why do you think it turned colors? What action made it turn colors? Putting in the input. So it's a symbol that it's ready, it's done, it's completed. Okay. The other tool is not ready, done, or completed. All right. Okay. So what we need to do is double click on that one. And here we can specify that we want to use the zone area as the input to the second model. By the way, the little recycle buttons So you see the little recycle button beside the tool? The little recycle button right here. And this one doesn't have a recycle button. Okay, so the difference between those two, I should say icon, not button. The recycle means that you want to use one of these data things on the map. The yellow sideways box means that you want to utilize the object that's been added to the map. Okay. Now at this point they're the same thing. However, if you change the data source of one or the other, it could have an implication. But right now they're both pointed to the same data source, but you could change that. It's important that you choose the right one. Here I'm going to choose the zone area, and it's the only zone area, so it's okay. I'm going to choose zone area, and then for zone field, I'm going to choose ID, and for the value raster, I'm going to choose the elevation data set. All right, so now all I have to do is choose a output table. I'm going to put the output table in the same directory I've been working in, which in my case is the the courses web mapping data folder. I'm just going to call this summary.dbs. Now, when I click OK, everything turns green. We're all good. We've got a model that's complete, and you would think that we're done, and we're almost done, but there's still a few things that we need to update to make our model absolutely complete. Okay. At this point, we need to rethink about which of these inputs are things that we want the end user to deal with or to be able to change, and which of these outputs are things that we want the user to have when they're done. Okay? Right now, there's only one output, and we want the user to have it. But if there were multiple outputs, we have to think about which ones we wanted them to have. All right? So, which ones of these do we want the user to be able to control? Well, I already said that allowing the user to control a large raster data set doesn't work. So we're always going to be hitting this raster data set. The raster data set, if we want to change it, we have to change our tool. So this is a tool for examining this raster data set. It's not a tool for examining any raster data set. But we do want the user to be able to choose the point that they want summarized. So this circle is one of the things that we want the user to be able to choose. Okay? So we could right click on that guy and say that we want to make that a model parameter. Now when anybody opens our tool, they know that they could specify a different user point. Specify a different one. And if anybody, they can specify a different user point. Now what would their circle size have to be? Well, that would have to be 100, unless, and let's change this. Let's make it so that they can change the input size. If we right click on buffer and we say make variable from parameter, and we choose the distance, now we can allow them to change that distance value. And the way that we do that is right click on this guy and also say that we want to make that a model parameter. So now both of these will show up as model parameters when the user clicks on our tool. Both of these will show up as model parameters. It's also good practice to make the output be a model parameter. That way the user can specify where they want to put it. Now, when you're doing this for the web, they don't specify, but it's good practice. So it's not necessary for web. We're also going to make this a model parameter because it's good practice, because that's the output, and we want the user to be able to specify where to put that. So right click on there and say that's going to be a model parameter as well. So now we've got 1, 2, 3 model parameters And here's our very simple model. What it's going to do is take a point or points, actually could take multiple points. It could actually take polygons. It's going to buffer them. Then it's going to use that buffer output. So now it's a polygon. And it's going to make that be the zonal statistic. And then it's going to, so it's going to, as part of that process, it's going to find out what the mean, the mode, the standard deviation is for that polygon, and output that to a table. And that's what this does. All right? So I'm going to go ahead and save this now. Okay, so once you have this built, the next step is to test it and then to publish it. Okay? So we're going to test it right now. So I'm going to close it down. And a few of you said you've kind of used Model Builder before. So I have to say this because if you kind of used Model Builder before, you probably know that, I'm sorry, I don't know how I could fix this on my laptop. It's all scrunched together. But you can say model run or run entire model. You can run your model from right here. However, doing so will not get it ready to be published. You have to run it from the dialog window, and I'll show you what I mean by a second. So you can test it here, but it won't run the way it needs to run unless you do the next step that I'm going to talk about here. So, for example, I could say run right now, and it would run. It's not doing the in-memory one. Okay, so maybe I thought I was smarter than I thought. That should work though. Let me see. In-memory model builder. We don't have to do it, in memory here, but in memory. Okay, maybe there's no slash beforehand. Model. Okay, that works. All right, so I forgot to explain that, by the way, what in memory was. So when you're building a model in Model Builder, if you're ever creating a data set that you know is going to be fairly small and always is going to be fairly small, you can use this in-memory keyword, and ArcGIS doesn't create a version of that smaller data set on disk. It only puts it in memory. So it's creating a version of the data set, and it's just giving it a memory tag, and it'll actually operate a lot faster than it would if it had to write it out onto disk. So it's a good practice. The other advantage is there's nothing to clean up. Once the process is completed, it shuts it down. It's no longer there. It frees that memory space up. And so if it's a temporary process, you might as well make it in memory. If it's a temporary data set, you might as well make it in memory. So in-memory workspace is a small workspace, and it only works for vector data. So it only works for vector data. You should keep your vector data pretty small if you want to use it, and it gets shut down. It doesn't exist after the process is done running. Okay, it's for intermediate data. I could have put an actual path there, you know, a location on my disk, but this will run faster. So that's why I did it. Okay, so I tested it. It runs great. I'm now going to save it again and close it. Now I have to run it from the dialog. By that, I mean I have to go to our toolbox and double click it. Okay, now see how I opened it, and now it works as a tool. So this is kind of cool because for those of you who have used Model Builder before, I can create my own tools. I have a tool, and there's already an interface designed for that tool. Pretty neat. Okay, I could create a very complex tool that you could run from ArcGIS, and my end users would only have to double click on the little icon in our toolbox, and they would get this. Okay, the things that I made parameters are what show up as these things. Remember, I made user coordinate parameter, and I made distance a parameter. Okay. Summary.dbf, I made that a parameter. In other words, I specified where they could save it. I don't really like that parameter name. So before I run it, I'm going to go back and hit edit. And I can change the name of this parameter by going into properties. Is that it? No. Maybe I just slow click on it. No, it's slow click. No. Right click. Oh, there's one. Rename. That's what I want to do. I'm just going to change this to summary. Okay, that's good. That's good enough. You'll see that the parameter names do matter because that's how we get the values. We'll talk about on Thursday when we actually run this from the web. Okay, so I'm going to save this one more time and close it down, and I'll double click on summary elevation. Now this little red, I get a little red X, meaning that I can't run this right now. If I hover over the little red X, I get an explanation as to why I can't run it. It says, well, it disappeared already. Let's do it again. It says that that file already exists. Okay. Well, if I go cancel and I go back up to geoprocessing and I say geoprocessing options, I can say I want to overwrite the outputs of geoprocessing operations. So click that button right there. So now I can say, okay, now it will let me overwrite that operation, which is what I want. So make sure that you have overwrite outputs turned on and you can overwrite outputs. I think that should be on by default personally. And I like that it does show me that I'll be overwriting something, but I like how it doesn't prevent me from actually running the tool. All right. So now I run this tool from the dialog box. This is a necessary step in order to publish this to the server. So I say OK, and it runs through. Okay, I could go ahead and close this at this point. And notice that it added the summary table to the view. I can look at the, sorry, keep doing that. I can look at the table and see the values that I'll eventually want to report to the user. I see the min, the max, the range, the mean, the standard deviation. These numbers represent the elevation summaries. So the average elevation in a 100-meter circle around that point is 233, we'll say, because I'm rounding, 33 meters, or feet. That must be in feet. It can't be in meters, right? That'd be way too. 232 meters in southern Forest County. That doesn't exist anymore. So it must be in feet, which is weird that they would mix units like that. Okay, so I've got my tool working. It worked. Now the next step is to actually publish that tool. To publish the tool, I go up to geoprocessing and I say results. This will show me the results of my geoprocessing operation. If I expand this, I can see that I ran this summarize elevation. See this right here, okay? I'm pointing at with the mouse and I pointed at my hand. The reason that you have to run it through the dialog is if you don't run it through the dialog, it doesn't show up here, and therefore you can't publish it. It has to show up there before you publish it. So now I can publish it. Okay, for those of you who haven't used Model Builder before, this is really nice because let's say I wanted to run a tool 5 times, but I wanted to change one thing. Well, now I could run this again by just double clicking on this, and I could modify and go maybe 200 meters. Okay, I could run it again and run it again. I'm not going to do that, but I could run it this tool and I could keep everything the same, including the environment settings. I don't know if you've used environment settings before, but like if I said, okay, I have a certain coordinate system that I want to use when I'm processing, I can set that in the environment settings which are right here. Set the environments. I could set a certain place to store the outputs. I could set the output coordinate system here. I could set the snap raster. I could set the cell size, and anything that I change there, if I subsequently click on a tool that's been run, it will choose all the same environment settings. So I don't have to set the environment settings up every time I run the tool. So it's a nice. I know this isn't a class in Model Builder, but I'm showing you the nice things that the Model Builder allows for. It allows you to set those parameters once and then rerun a tool over and over and over again. Let's say you're experimenting and you want to find the kind of value, so we can modify this value slightly and rerun it, and look at the results and figure out what the sweet spot was. Okay, so that worked. I'm just going to hit cancel. I don't want to run this again. Now, when I publish this, I right-click on Summarize Elevation, and I say Share as Geoprocessing Service. Share as Geoprocessing Service. All right. And here, it's a lot like the screen that gets set up when we run the map service. When we created the map service, we get an option to publish a service, to save a service definition file, or to override an existing service. We're going to talk mostly about the first and the last one. Publishing a service means that we're going to publish a brand new service, whereas overriding an existing service means that we're going to modify a service that already exists and use a new one. So like if you find out your service doesn't quite work the way you want, you would use override an existing service. If you want to publish a brand new service, you could say publish an existing service. Okay, so I'm going to say publish a new service, a service, because we haven't done that yet. And then I'm going to, I thought I already set it up on this machine. So I've got to set up, sorry, I've got to do this, this part. What is it? Didn't anybody know the URL? Sorry, I mean, sorry. That's .100/ArcGIS. And then the username was, what do we have? I don't know why this stopped. Mapper. And then web mapper with a capital W. And then a 3, and a capital B, and then mapper all lowercase. Or is there an @ sign? Okay, @PPER finish. Hopefully that's the right password. Doesn't look like it. I messed up. Anybody know what the hold on. Make sure that I'm typing the right thing. That's what I'm typing right now. Does that look right? Is it connecting for you? Come on.
No.
It's not connecting for you. Okay. Well, it could be that the that's for the Geo server. All right. Well, we're literally at the last step. Okay, and so Can anybody verify that this is the code? This is what I said before, or you sure that's what I put? Do you have that written down? And is the username mapper? And it's 10. Okay, that's definitely up. Okay, I got it. So it was site admin. So the username is site admin. The password is correct. Okay. So the username is site admin. The password is webmapper. Okay. We're almost done today. I'm just going to publish this and show you that there's a REST endpoint, and then we'll work with implementing that on Thursday. All right. So now, for some reason, it's kept my name service name. I'm going to change that to back to summer. I think it's because there's a model, summarize Elev. Change it back to summarize Elev. And then I'm going to choose to use an existing folder. I'm going to choose my existing folder. If any of you are working along right now, choose your folder or make a new folder. And if any of you are choosing, if you're watching this video later, likewise, don't write over mine, create your own service, okay? So use an existing folder so that you can name it. You don't have to even name it the same thing, but if you did name it the same thing, it wouldn't overwrite it. So now I hit continue. And at this point, I have several options, okay? Again, we're not gonna walk through talking about every single one, but this is a geoprocessing service. So in general, it tells you that. It tells you that this is a geoprocessing service. We're not going to allow uploads. On this one, the most important thing here is the execution mode, okay? The execution mode can either be synchronous or asynchronous. If you think that your model is going to take more than 10 to 15 seconds, you should choose asynchronous. What that means is that you have to get your data in a to request fashion. In other words, here's the scenario. Your web app says, I want to run this process. The server then says, okay, it's going to take me a little while. Here's your process ID. And it hands a process ID back as the result, okay? Then you, on the client side, say, here's my process ID. Is it done yet? No. That's the server says no, okay? Is it done yet? Here's the process ID. Is it done yet? No. Okay, it's a process ID. Yes, it's done. Okay, then you say, okay, here's my process ID. I know it's done. Give me the result. Okay, that's an asynchronous. So it's a lot of processes. It makes it more complex. Okay, but it's doable. If you say synchronous, what happens is, and we're going to choose synchronous because it doesn't take more than 15 seconds to run. If you choose synchronous, you just say, I want to run this process. The server then runs the process and hands the results back. But if it takes too long, you know that the internet times out. Okay, it won't wait more than 10 seconds for 10 or 15 seconds for a process to execute. So don't choose synchronous unless you know that it's a process that'll take less than the timeout for a web page. You know, like if you go to a web page and the internet's kind of slow, sometimes it just pops back up and says, couldn't find that page, right? It does that. Well, that's the browser saying, giving up. Sometimes you can hit refresh and it'll come in the next time, and that's because that time it took a few less seconds to come back. So if you have a long-running service and you choose asynchronous, it could do the same thing. It could try to make a request but then fail because it took too long to get the request, right? But our process runs fairly quickly, so we can choose synchronous, and it'll complete within less than 10 seconds. Okay, maybe we'll demonstrate one synchronous one in a second. All right, message level for testing purposes. I like to go down here and say info. Okay, what that means is that the server will provide all of the messages. So if you choose info, it's going to provide all the warning messages, all the error messages, and all the info messages. I like to choose that. I also, maximum records returned by the server, 1,000 is going to do just fine because we're only going to be returning one row of data. Okay. If you're expecting a lot of data to come back from the server, choose a higher number. We're just going to leave that there. Pooling, we're going to leave for now. We're not going to mess with pooling. Basically, if you wanted to have more of your processes running on the server to make it more responsive, you can increase that. But this is only really applicable if you have thousands of people trying to access your server. If you only got 10 to 20 people, just leave these the defaults. Processes. Again, we're going to leave that the default. That's almost all. I almost never change this, even for a complex application. All right, here is the here's the information that will be published, that you'll see, that the person that's developing your application will see when they go to develop an application. So this is the name of the tool, so we can just leave that there. Okay, we can also put a description that might be helpful. Summarizes a elevation data set for Forest County. All right. Now these are the data that they get back. Okay. So one of them is the user point. Okay. I'm sorry. The data the provider get back. The user point. We want the user point to be one of the inputs, and we have several possibilities for the inputs here. One of them is that they could be a user-defined value. One of them is a choice list, and one of them is a constant value. Okay, these are the three choices. User-defined value means that we want the user to provide the point location. That's what we want to choose. Choice list means that the users are going to be given a list of choices. It doesn't make sense for our particular application, but we could, like, let's say instead of letting the user choose any point, we had 3 or 4 canned points. Okay? In that case, I wouldn't even use a geoprocessing service, but you could use that. So user-defined value is what we want. And here is the schema. In other words, this is what the table should look like that gets provided. We'll see this will make a little more sense when we build the front end part of it on Friday. But actually it has to be a table built, or Thursday. There actually has to be a table built. So we'll leave that there. And then we could click include features, which will build it with the currently defined feature, so we could just tweak it. So that's always a nice thing to do. All right, distance. Okay, the distance is what the user defines, and we're going to change that. We're going to leave that's a user-defined value. We'll just leave it there. The user gets to choose what the value is. They can change it from 100 meters to whatever. We could make it a constant value, meaning that the user wouldn't have an ability to change it. But we want to make it a user-defined value. And finally, we have the summary. Now here, this is the output. And so we don't have the ability to change anything. This is what the user gets. And we're not going to change anything in the schema. In other words, they're going to get area, min, max, range, mean, standard deviation. We're not going to change any of those values. That's what the user is going to get back. And we're going to leave it like that. I don't even know if we have the power to change it. No, we don't have the power to change it because this is an output parameter. All right. So at this point, I'm going to hit analyze first. And, oh, there's a big error. The model summary parameter is missing a syntax dialog expression. Okay. So in other words, it's forcing me to input in the item description. Okay. So it's forcing me to put something here. I'm going to put, this is the output parameter and is a table, something like that. Okay. Now I'll hit analyze again, still have the error. Okay, distance, value, or field parameter. Okay, it wants one of these in every single one. So I'm going to say distance, example, 100 meters. I still got one more, which is probably the user point. This is the input point as a feature class, something like that. I mean, you could put, you know, howdy in every single box, okay? But those wouldn't be as descriptive. This is if other people want to use your tool. But I didn't know that it forced you to do that. I must be new. Okay. All right. So that's fine. The other errors or actually warnings are telling us that the data is going to be copied up to the server. We know that. We've already copied this data to the server. It's not a big deal. It's going to take a few moments to do when we click OK, but it's going to do that. All right. So now we don't have any more errors, and we can go and hit publish. Telling us these will be copied to the server. We hit OK, and they're not huge data sets, so they get copied to the server fairly quickly. Although not lickety-split, because they're all going through the internet to get there. All right. Oh, failed to publish service. That's no good. Is anybody else attempting to publish at the same time? I'm probably not, but just wondering. Are you getting the same message?
Sure.
It may have something to do with the internet hiccup, but I mean the internet not working. It would be nice to be able to show you the REST endpoint. But we can do that on Thursday. So that should be fine. Stage service, upload service didn't work. All right, what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to leave this running for just a second, and I'm going to say that class is pretty much over today. I am going to go over to the server and see if I can solve this problem really quickly on the server and try to re-upload. So if anybody wants to see if that process works, you can stick around. But what we're going to do is, once this is published, there will be a process I mean, a geoprocessing server available here. Like when I go into Raber, there'll be one more service, but it'll be called a it won't say map service, it'll be called geoprocessing service. And we can run our geoprocessing service right from here. Or what we'll practice on Thursday is running our geoprocessing service from a web app. But that's where we're going to be. So I'm going to go ahead and leave this up just for a second. And I'm going to go down to my office, try to get it to work. I suspect that there's just some either firewall issue or or something similar to that that just happened. So it's basically there's an internet hiccup because you'll notice that it created. So there's two tools that it runs. The one that I have highlighted right here. It staged the service just fine. The service package got ready on our machine, but it failed to actually upload it. And so I just got to figure out why that happened. So I'll be back in a little while to see if I can figure that out. I'm going to leave the video running so that if I fix it, it'll be on the video. Sure. Oh, about that class? Yeah.
Is it you mentioned
if you run experiments on categorical, on continuous data, it does the rings for you. Okay. You don't have to write it. Use the SPSS for them. Okay. Don't do it by hand. It's been forever to rank all of it. Yeah. Well, around. Yeah. No problem at all. Right back.
I got it.
Yes, I was trying to publish stuff. Instead of doing polygons, you get some just on point GHY, so you can publish that on server, but it's not working, so I'll see what I can do. I thought I had my data ready. You're doing the points in code. Yeah. No, that's not a lot of time. I don't know if we can do the spatial polygons. I'll be fair. Going do the points, not polygon. So what we do is find we just publish the layer onto the rest directory. Access it that way. And it's going to turn that layer into a shape geoprocessing. Monday, Thursday, Thursday we can watch. That's fine.
I'll see you. All right. Okay. All you was a reboot. The internet problem must have caused an issue, and the server has stopped accepting any sort of publishing. So it's still going. So I'm going to be talking. I know you're the only one in here, and Chris, I'm recording a video, so that's why I'm going to be continuing to talk. So anyway, people will be able to see this for reference. But I'm going to try to publish this one more time. It should work. I worked on my desktop, so I'm going to hit publish. And this time we should have a published service. So it'll take a few seconds. All right, so it did successfully publish. You can see that it uploaded it correctly and say OK here. And now we can see in here, I created a few tests. So I've got models, my map service, those are tests. This is the one I just published right here, Raber Summarize Elevation. If I click on that, you can see that there's a task called Summarize Elevation. Click on that, and here is where you would be able to see what the inputs are. So we've got our 3 inputs, well, 2 inputs and 1 output, our parameters. So we can hit execute task, and you can see that here is the information that you need to submit for your input. We've got our features. In this case, it's a single point, and this is the XY location of that point. And then we've got our distance units. So let's say we wanted to modify this slightly from the way that we ran it the first time. I could change the location. I could move, let's say I could move 500 meters north or 500 meters east, and I could say that I want my distance to be, instead of 100, I want it to be 300. So now I can rerun this whole thing. It's going to execute this task. And here are the results right here. So I've got my results. They look kind of cryptic here, but I could see that the min, the max, the range, the standard deviation is all there. Now the mean that we've created from the second run is different than the first run. It's 196 rather than what was it before, 230 something. So it ran. Here's all the messages. The messages are only output because we told it to output some messages. Otherwise, the messages wouldn't even be there. All right, so you can see that we can now access this service through these URLs. And on Thursday, we'll actually discuss handling or utilizing the web APIs, JavaScript, to call these processes using these URLs. And you can see that it's a rather complex set of inputs, but there is a way to make that a little bit simpler. So that's what we're going to do on Thursday, is call this from. So we're going to create a user click. We're going to call this service, get the results back, and just show the results somewhere on the screen. All right. So again, there wasn't anything broken except for the fact that the server just had to be rebooted. So once I rebooted it, I was able to publish it. All right. I'll make a note when I'm going to upload this video, and I'll make a note that I don't know why I'm saying this on the video, but I'll make a note that there's a dead talking spot in the middle of the video so that you can skip forward to it. All right, and that's the end. I think I'm going to end there. All right.